today we're welcome back a guest we had on some a while ago, and we were talking about profitability in hospitality and profitability in hotels, and we had a really good conversation about that. And then David, who is the guest, decides to write a book. I'm going to come back to. It's a journey to write this book, I can tell you, but to write this book, and he's very kind and asked me to put a couple of words in, and I'm reading I think it was the draft. I don't think it was the final version, but I was like thinking, okay, if hospitality people get this book in their hand, hospitality is going to be a better place, because you all know out there, one of the things I'm very, very passionate about is that we have to do business for good with taking care of our people, community, and the planet, but we have to be profitable and we have to understand how we make profitable businesses. And one of the things I discovered in my career was that I really didn't understand how the P&L worked, but we talked about that last time. This time we're going to discover David's book and what he learned with that and some of the principles in the book. So, welcome back to the show, David. It's a great pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Michael. It's wonderful to be here, and I think it's just amazing that you're all the way across the pond, as we say, and I guess on both sides. But
Yeah.
it's great to be here with you and your audience. Absolutely, thank you.
David, for people that haven't listened to the first one, we'll throw that link into the show notes so they can go back and listen to that great conversation about, profitability and hospitality. But just give a bit of an overview about you and your background. And then I think it eventually will lead into to why you decided to write a book.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a small town in Atlantic Canada that had a summer resort. And kind of by a twist of fate, I ended up working there when I was 19 in the bars and the restaurants and kind of fell in love with the business, went to hotel school. And then I ended up working for the same company for the next 31 years, which was Canadian Pacific, but it became Fairmont in the late 90s and worked all over Canada and also in the States in San Francisco. But I got off the merry-go-round, so to speak, 10 years ago and started my own business, the Hotel Financial Coach, and that's how the book ended up, coming to be through that whole evolution, and, yeah, that's kinda my story.
And coming back to, into the book, and I think this is really important. What is David? Because you have a very, in my view, a very clear purpose. But what is your purpose? What you're doing now? Because you've been doing this for 10 years. In
Yeah,
my view, to do any kind of start out as a coach or consultant kind of gig, lots of people do
yes,
that. You have to have a very strong determination as well purpose.
yeah.
So, what is
Well,
the purpose?
I like to say I have a dream, and my dream is that, everybody in hospitality understands their numbers,
Mm,
and, in our business, we expect everybody to be of service, and we expect everybody to be good leaders and good stewards of our colleagues, look after them, but we kind of forget about the business of hospitality and we by design don't train our employees on the numbers, and I think that's what's wrong with our business to a large extent. And that's my personal mission and my dream is to change that because the numbers are not anywhere near as scary as everybody makes them out to be. And as my mother used to say, "David, you're not the sharpest, knife in the drawer sometimes." If I can figure it out, anybody can, and I sincerely mean that, and I see it all the time when I work one-on-one with people and work in workshops, I see the lights come on all the time.
yeah.
So that's my purpose, and, it keeps me going, keeps me getting up every morning.
Yeah, and I think since we did the last interview, which I'm quite certain was in the middle of the pandemic when I was back and looking last week, I think it was the middle of the pandemic. We already talked at that point. It's going to be very it's skilled. There's going to be, financial skills as always in business, have we said. And I think there's a bit of greenwashing. We said as leaders, we're good at it. And I think it's very much by luck sometimes, depending on your boss was in hospitality you learned. And because I was very lucky to be put through the McDonald's system and be the manager route in there, then eventually you learn about productivity and P&L because you're going to be asked about it every month by your boss. So therefore, you will have to learn every line and understand how you contributed to it. But lots of people don't do that, and then you come out and get them. You become their boss, and then you find out I actually have to train, and that's actually where you become really good at P&L when you have to train other people. That's a different conversation. But
Yeah,
really interesting then, that purpose now have led you to write this book. Why a book? Because, you know, that's quite
yeah.
an endeavor. You can just do your webinar and your coaching and so on,
Right.
still do that mission, but why a book?
Well, it's kind of an extension of my I've been writing a weekly blog since, 2016, and I was kind of forced into that in that, early on in my coaching career, things weren't going that well, and, maybe year 3, I hired a lady. Her name is Debbie Allen, and her thing is she's calls herself the expert of experts, and she
Mm,
creates brands, and, part of her program was I had to write she said, "We're gonna call it the 7 secrets of" and David, you fill in the rest. You need to go write that. So I wrote the 7 secrets of creating a financially engaged leadership team in your hotel. She goes, "That's too long of a title." I said, "I don't care. That's what it's gotta be." But I realized through that process that I had a voice and that I had something to say and thoughts about our business and how we do things. And so from there, I just took one of those chapters and I sent it to a bunch of hotel publications, online publications, and magazines. And it got published a few weeks later, and I thought, "Well, gee, that wasn't too hard." So I started writing, and I kinda got bit by the bug big time, and, I've been writing, most weekday mornings, I'll get up at 4:30 or 5 AM and grab a cup of coffee and write something, and it's kinda like my meditation or my running. It's my thing that sets my day off, and I know when I haven't written something and I'm not having a great day and I'm, cranky or something, it's because I didn't write today. So, the book was just it, and I talk about it in the book. It's just a compilation of those blogs organized in a fashion that kind of takes the reader on a bit of a journey through the whole landscape of what I call hospitality financial leadership.
and then I guess it took you some years then because I guess you didn't. I don't know if there was an intent of the book straight away, but from
Yeah.
other conversations, I know you spent quite a long time putting the book together.
6 years from the first time I put it together and circulated it to try and get it published until it was published this May, it was almost exactly 6 years to the date, and, through
Wow.
that process, in the early goings, I didn't even get declined. I didn't even get a response from people about publishing it, and it wasn't until I met a friend of a friend who was a publisher that he actually looked at it, but he rejected it outright the first time after looking at it for not very long. And then one thing led to another, and I kind of talk about it a little bit in the book, and I mention her, but my grade 4 teacher, grade 3 teacher in school sent me a note because had read one of my blogs on Facebook and said, "Oh, it's so cute, David Lund. I remember you." Blah blah blah. One thing led to another, and she offered to read the manuscript and give me her feedback, and I had to mail it to her because she says, "I'm not gonna read that on a screen." And I was in California, and she was in New Brunswick, Canada, and I mailed it to her with $40 US for the return postage, and about 2 months later, I got it back, and it was full of Post-it notes and highlights and a big cover letter, and the cover letter basically said, "David, I don't know who you're writing this book for. You don't have an audience, and you need to weave your audience through every chapter." And
Yeah.
I was kind of like, crestfallen or whatever, heartbroken. But, one thing led to another, and one day I woke up and said, "She's right. This sucks. I can do better than that." So I rewrote it and gave it back to the same publisher who denied it before. This is probably, 4 years ago. And, he came back a couple of months later and said, "Yeah, I'd like to publish your book."
Mm.
And, but that was, and he sent me a contract, and the contract was dated March 10th, 2020. So we know what happened on March 12th. The whole world
Yeah.
shut down, and he shut down too. And he said, "I'm not touching anything in the hotel world or even publishing for a long time."
Yeah.
And it wasn't until early last year that he reached out and said, "Let's get this going again." And he hooked me up with my editor, Chris, and then we started at it again. And about halfway through last year, I said to Chris, "We have to stop because this sucks. I don't like this book. It's not organized the way I want it. It's not." Every time we go through a chapter, I'm going, "That was already in the other chapter." And there's so many things were just wrong with the book. So I rewrote it again. And by that time, I had written a lot more stuff that I thought was better and more congruent with the whole idea of the book. So I swapped out a lot of stuff and ended up with what you have in front of you today. And then it was on to editing it, which is painful, very painful. Let me tell
Yeah,
you,
yeah.
it's not fun editing your own stuff and trying to explain to someone who doesn't understand your business all the stuff that you've written about. And he pushed me really hard to make it, so that a grade threeer could understand it. So is the way he kind of expressed it. And I pushed back a lot on that because I said, people reading this will understand what I mean by RevPAR. He goes, no, they won't. I go, well, you're the editor. I guess you're right. um,
Well, I think that's often, when you're the lingo you're talking in, you presume that people understand.
yeah.
And
And lesson learned for me. But, you know, looking back on it now and getting the feedback from people that have read it, I'm really glad that we took 6 years to write it. I rewrote it twice, rewrote it 3 times, and just happy with the final result. It's well
im
worth it.
impressive. Is there you know, a lesson that comes out of that for you, in life or in
Well,
business, like
don't give
that
up,
growth? Don't give up. Yeah, I love that.
with anything in life. And,
Yeah,
if you're willing to work for it, and that's what my dad always used to say to me, David, you can do anything as long as you're willing to work for it.
yeah.
But that's the hook is you gotta be willing to work for it. And I would tell my kids the same thing. I have 3 daughters, and, I think it's just that's the way the world works, There's nobody just coming out of the womb that has the talent and all the answers or, is the breakthrough. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, and, just to give people a bit of an idea out there, Chip Conley endorsed it on the front page. We had Jim Conley on the show, number 100, and he is definitely an experienced gentleman in the hotel world and very successful business person that
Yeah,
moved on to Airbnb and now doing the Modern Elder Academy both in Mexico and in the US. So yeah, so definitely a book worth. But now we're going to dive a bit into the book because we talked a bit about it last time again, but I can see that your concept around hospitality, financial leadership has evolved a bit. So what is this about and why is it important, David?
yeah. Well, as you know, and as you mentioned, like, the finances are like a cornerstone of obviously our business, and we have to be profitable for us to continue to exist. That's just the way it works. But, when I started my journey, I Googled financial leadership and I got nothing. So I thought, well, I really like hospitality financial leadership, but it doesn't really just sort of flow off your tongue. And I Googled that and I found absolutely nothing. But to me, what hospitality financial leadership is, it's about having a prosperous career. And in our business, we work really hard. We're always working the weekends, we're always working the holidays, and we all want to get ahead. We all want to get that job where we have prosperity. And if you look up the definition of prosperity, it's not money, it's having time. And
Mm,
that's what I want for the people in our industry. I want us all to enjoy our careers and have more time with our family and our loved ones and our friends and our communities, as well as a great career in a great hotel or restaurant. But having that financial leadership leads you to prosperity.
yeah. And it's like, understanding the mechanism of how you build a great financial system. I think it is often if you understand it's a tool to get more time, then you suddenly look at finance in a very different way. Then it's just not for profit, it's of course the
Yeah.
outcome, and the profit gives you the freedom,
Yeah.
as you say, between the line. How do you get started achieve? Because that's great. Let me have some of that. People
Yeah.
probably so how do you get started with
Well,
achieving that?
imagine you're, the assistant front office manager in a 250 room hotel, and you've been working in the hotel business for 5 years, and you can kind of see a path in front of you. You've been working hard on your service skills and your colleague engagement skills. You're dedicated, but you also know that, the financial piece is missing. So what do you do? Well, talk to your boss, talk to your boss's boss, talk to HR, talk to somebody in accounting, talk to the controller, ask for help. Say, hey, can you explain this report to me? Can you show me what this means? I know I get it all the time. And I see that there's a couple things on here that I get, but the rest of it, I don't understand. Be curious. Our business is all about developing people. Mentorship is huge in the hospitality business, and the same can be applied and should be applied to the numbers piece. Everybody needs to get someone helping them along their path that can explain why we do what we do with the information we have, because it all means something. It all leads to something. And if you can get that into your DNA as a young leader or even a more experienced leader who wants to, take their career further, that's the fuel. But you have to be curious. People aren't going to just come up to you and grab you by the ear and say, "Come on, Michael, let's go learn numbers." And I experienced that firsthand. I had many young leaders that would come to me in the hotel and they had to do a budget or something for the first time. And they would say, "Can you help me?" I'd be, "Sure, come on, sit down. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to look at. Go do that. Come back next week and then show me what you came up with." And probably 80% of them, I would never see them again.
Mm.
But the 20% that took the effort to figure out what was in their expenses or, their staffing guide and their formulas for productivity, they figured it out pretty quick, and how to read the P&L and, how to write a good commentary and how to talk about the numbers. And it's like golfing. If if you wanna learn how to golf, you gotta get out there, 2 or 3 times a week and swing that club. It's the only way you're gonna learn. You're not gonna learn it by watching TV or reading a book. You gotta practice, and you're gonna hit a lot of balls into the water and a lot of balls into the woods. That's just what it is, and that's what it is with your numbers too. But through all of that, you will cross the bridge, and you will look back and you'll say, "Well, I have no idea what the big fuss was about with my numbers because it's pretty easy. It's pretty straightforward." And I hear that from people all the time that have crossed that bridge, that know their numbers, and that's my experience too. There was a day when I didn't understand it, and I thought it was a big mystery, but it's not.
So you talk about the 20% of the young leaders that came back, and I guess these are the people that really, they live and breathe, financial leadership. And well, how do they look when you're in the room with a person like that? How can you actually, when you're like trying to spot somebody that's really good at this,
Yeah,
really have the elements of what you describe in the book? How does
yeah.
that look? How does that feel?
Well, the way I could tell, it's not so much in the room, but if you're walking down the hall in the hotel in the back spaces and they see you coming, usually they turn around and head in the other direction because you're the controller and you're the big bad wolf. And you're going to ask them for something. You're going to ask them, "Okay, hey, where's that report I was looking for? Or where's that submission? Where's your accruals? Where's your expense report?" But the ones that would say, "Hey, David, did you get my submission? What did you think?" That's where the light comes on because they want to engage with you. They want to get your help. They want your feedback. They want to follow you. That's the clue.
And what happens in an organization when you start to get not just one, but a team of leaders that
Mm,
understand, the whole mindset around
yeah. That's the
financial?
magic. That's
What have you seen when you work with people and you write a bit about it in the book as well? What are the typical the traits that's happening in that organization?
yeah. I mean, if you've got a hotel and the general manager is gonna hold every department manager accountable for their guest service and their colleague engagement scores and their numbers, that's the perfect formula because everything else will fall in line. And I write about that in the book, and the chapter's called "The General Manager's Yardstick," and that's how it was
Mm,
explained to me. And I had the privilege of working with one gentleman who, my initial thoughts about him, he was Scottish and kinda stingy and a little bit mean maybe, but I thought he was, a bit of a tyrant, but turns out he was actually, a really good manager, and he just was fascinated with making sure that all of his managers understood what was in the middle of their statement. They didn't have to understand accounting. They didn't have to understand, how to do a journal entry or anything crazy like that, but just tell me what's in this line on your expenses. It says guest supplies. Well, it's $40,000 for the year. What did you buy?
mm.
And he would just stop talking. And if you didn't have the answer, he would say, "Go find out." He would say, "It's not rocket science." And he was right. And we ended up preparing a budget for the hotel that year based on his, demands of all the managers. And everybody grumbled at the time. But the following year, we had a great result because all the managers knew what was in the middle of their statement. So that when, we're not making our top line revenues, they knew what they could throw off the ship. They knew what they could, you know, finesse. And that's really what it's all about is understanding what you have to play with and what you can go without, what you can stretch a little further when you need to. And also on the flip side, when times are good, what can I buy a little bit more of so that when, the wind starts blowing, I've got a little in the closet.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting that recession. What's typical are the beliefs around finance you have met? Like, what typical are the beliefs, which you're not the controller or you're really
Yeah.
bought into it? Then you
Well,
believe this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But
number one wrong belief is that the numbers are the hard part of hospitality. They're not.
mm,
Number 2 is that it's scary that,
yeah,
I need to go to school to figure this out, or I need, to take a course or something like that. Having a guide is sure, that's the fast way is having a mentor or a guide. But, you know the whole idea that the numbers are a mystery is just a myth. That's all it is because the numbers aren't the difficult part of hospitality. And, you know, I would say read the book and you'll see what I mean, but, just go on my website and read some of my blogs. I explain everything. It's
yeah. And I think one of the things you explain in here, and I was sitting and reading it because I just had a business conversation about it recently. To just find the right chapter here. Yesterday, you talk about the P&L versus the asset statement, what is what, and
yeah,
why, where does the number needs to match. And I think a lot of people, when they see the balance sheet, don't really understand the connections between the assets and the P&L and why it's important, your net profit and where you go and read. Because
yeah.
then actually you're in balance and you actually got all the lines correct. And I think that was one of the that took me a long time to explain in an end of year results why that needed to be like that. And that was actually to somebody that does bookkeeping. I was
Yeah.
like, that it has to add up. And actually what is missing is the shares of the business is not accounted for. And I only
Yeah.
knew that because I've had
Well,
basic training.
I'm actually not a real accountant. I'm a hotel person that ended up, doing some courses basically, but I don't have a CPA or CGA or CMA or whatever you call it. But, by design, I think the accounting industry makes things more mysterious than they really are. Because when you boil down the relationship between the balance sheet and the income statement, it's the retained earnings that links the two together. And when you think about, the basic financial equation, assets equal liabilities, plus or minus shareholders' equity, that sounds like quite a mouthful, but think about your house. Your house is the asset. Maybe it's worth $1 million. Your liability is your mortgage. It's probably 600,000. So what's your equity? It's the difference. It's 400,000. Well, that's the balance sheet. And if you think about your own world and every 2 weeks you get a paycheck, you pay all your expenses, you pay your mortgage, do everything you need to do with your money, but you have a little bit left over. So you invest it in your 401k or RRSP or whatever it is. And over time, you build up a bit of a nest egg. That's actually just your equity. That's your net worth. It's exactly the same in business, but you would never hear, somebody from KPMG or PwC explaining it that way because they would talk about, all the different stuff that they need to talk about, make it
Yeah.
sound really complicated,
Yeah.
but
And
it's
I think
not.
also that I don't think that's lots what happens with financing and investing and raising money becomes all this lingo that just confuse business leaders, founders, CEOs even. I've seen CEOs that doesn't really understand what makes up the productivity sometimes. And you can see they're
I
guided
know.
by the CFO and the CFO is not right. And actually, understanding that productivity is actually about something, the amount of training you put in your people, that's actually the biggest impact you can do on productivity. There's this misconception that it's
Yeah.
says about the technology or the tools you get them, which of course has an impact. You talk about the three pillars of hospitality, and I thought that was really interesting because I agree with you. As soon as you learn the basic and the foundations of numbers and understand that this is a universal language, actually the really hard part of a business is the three pillars of hospitality, as you have in the book. Can you talk a bit about them and why it's so important to understand that in
Yeah.
connection
So
financial
it's
leadership?
the 3 pillars are something that I talk about all the time, but it's the guest, it's the colleague, and it's the money. And in our business, we always say, our most important asset are our employees. Many companies talk about that, but we all know that guest service and providing great guest service is the cornerstone of our business. So if we can combine great guest service with great colleagues, we're going to create great experiences for our guests. That's what it's all about. And that will lead us directly to more money. But at the same time, we have a myth that, the money, look after the guests and the money will look after itself. How many times have you heard that in life, right? Well, that's not true. The money never looks after itself. We need all of those leaders, managers, to be able to manage their department and manage their money, because a great hotel is the sum of its parts. It's all those departments. In a big hotel, you can have, 10, 20 different departments and, 30, 40 leaders. Even I've worked in hotels where we've had over 100 leaders. They all have a part to play. Everybody needs to be looking after their guests, looking after their colleagues, looking after their money. And what do we mean by the money? We mean managing their expenses and their payroll, maybe some revenue if they have revenue in their department, but that's what they need to be able to do. And they need to be able to juggle all three of those balls every single day. It's never going away and it's never going to be perfect. Everybody thinks money and numbers, there's an answer. Well, the only thing we know for sure about the budget is it's wrong. It's never right.
It's super
So,
interesting you say that. I just gone through some financial modeling in a business we are raising money, and everybody's so obsessed about that model has to be correct. And of course, we need to understand it, and all the input has to
yeah,
be realistic. But again, and then you go out and you start showing the model when you're asked, which you very rarely asked by investors, because they know that it's not gonna be whatever you projected. It's gonna
right.
either be a little bit worse, something in the
Yeah,
middle, or really off. And very once in a while, it goes way above expectations.
yeah.
So
There's a the basic misunderstanding in our world, and I think this is in all business, is that, we all studied math in school, and there's always a right and wrong answer to a problem. We extrapolate that into the business world. And sure, we want to have good results and we want to have accurate numbers and we want to have budgets that make sense. But the whole idea that there's an answer that you need to get to that's correct, that's bogus. Cause like you said, the only thing we know for sure is going to be higher or lower, right? So it's never right. It's just a plan with like a map with numbers. And on that map, we're going to a destination, yes, but hey, we might take a few detours to get there. We might end up a little north of it or a little south of it. We still know where we're going. We still have that as our target. But the idea that there's an answer like an algebra problem is bogus.
yeah, and I think also, I think a lot what I've learned, in my last couple of years of business is it's about positioning everything. It's not about when I talk about positioning, I'm not talking about just positioning the brand, but it's also positioning your strategies and actually being agile around that. So you actually, what you do with the numbers is that the numbers become a reflection of how you position yourself as a business and what you believe is possible with all the brand, the people strategy, it all comes together. You can might be able to deliver these results, but you might need to position them in a bit different because suddenly inflation happens and things get 20% more expensive on food costs. And therefore your business
Yeah.
really changed.
We're we're always going to be facing that. We're always going to have those challenges inside of our business, inside of our hotels, inside of our restaurants. We wanna prepare for what we think is gonna happen and get everybody organized so that they know what resources they need and what they have and what they don't have. But like you said, we don't know what's around the next corner in our worlds. That's just the way it is, but we wanna be prepared. And I firmly believe that that's one of the biggest challenges in hospitality is that people are not organized and they're not ready. They fly by the seat of their pants. They hope for the healthy top line, and that just is going to generate, profits at the end, and that'll be good enough. But it doesn't work. It's best when we do it that way. When we get lucky, things are okay. But as you know, when we hit some headwinds, that's not gonna it's not gonna save the day.
And it's really interesting that what you're saying as well. It's also my experience is that it's the exercise of doing this together and not being focused on having a specific outcome. And we have to get that outcome no matter what. We all agree this will be the ideal world, but we can then navigate from there. But it's really interesting you say, and that's still you feel the second thing you talked about is that we are not organized enough. We are not spending the time on planning or positioning, as I call it, enough. We're still reacting. Is that something you still see on the other side of the pandemic? Because I was a bit like in the hope that
Totally.
this is that's the
Yeah,
learning you got out of that.
we always repeat the same mistakes in hospitality. When things are bad, we say, "Well, we're never gonna let this happen again," and then when things get good again, we go right back to where we were before, which is flying by the seat of our pants and not having the kind of planning in place, like a detailed budget or detailed rolling forecast or staffing guides and, zero-based expenses. All the things that I talk about in the book, we don't do those things because, money's coming in at the top and money's coming out at the bottom and things are gonna be okay. And the best time to, get organized is when we are busy, not when, you know, the ship is sinking. Because when the ship is sinking, there's nothing to do anyways, but,
Mm,
throw everything
yeah,
off of it anyways, right? That
yeah.
doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But how can we figure out inside of our business when we're really busy and we know volume hides a multitude of sins? What could we be doing better? So do your review, do your planning, when things are busy, when you can take the time and have the resources to do them. Don't wait until you're taking on water to figure out how to, sail smoother. It doesn't work very well that way.
Yeah, and it actually leads very much to the next question because in here the book also you have some great examples of people that has taken this approach and work with lots of the advice you're giving. Can you talk a bit about like use case for we can take food costs, we can take labor costs, which probably are it's really high on people's agenda right now, and I think revenue management will come again because it seems like the world has just got a bit more uncertain again last week and yeah, but what would you choose? And you can make your own choice, David. But like, give an example of how do people actually work with this differently than they normally would when they work with your method?
Yeah, well, I'll give you the example of food costs. So, I write a chapter in the book about food costs and the 80/20 rule. And the theme throughout the book is really, there's nothing in that book that I really created. I've put my own spin on things. I tell stories about what I've learned, but I didn't say in the book, but I firmly believe this. It takes a community to write a book. So I just took all of the ideas that I've learned over the last 40 years and put them in the book. But
Yeah.
the 80/20 rule of food costs is a great example. So I learned that from a good friend of mine who was an executive chef. He's now a general manager. And he said, David, like 80% of the food I buy is 20 things. I said, yeah, whatever. He said, no, it's true. Let me show you. So we actually figured it out. And this was a big hotel. And, I think it was maybe 78%, but he was spot on. So he says, all I focus on is every month between me, the catering team, and my sous chefs, and the banquet captains, whatever. We have a meeting every week, and once a month, we pick a new item that we're all going to figure out how we can be more efficient with that item. He gave
Mhm.
me the example of orange juice, and it was one of the top items we buy in the hotel, and we buy like $200,000 worth of orange juice a year, or something crazy like that. And
Yeah.
he said he went back to his supplier. His idea was, "Can you not give me a bigger container than a 2-liter container? And if you can, I want a lower price." So the vendor, did their magic and came back a few weeks later, and they had a 5-liter container, and we actually ended up saving 6% on the orange juice. So 6% of $200,000 is 12,000 bucks, just like that.
Yeah.
And
That was
every
not
month
a
it was
hard discipline to
no.
do.
No, it's not, and people love to come up with ideas. People love to be the one who can ring the bell, right? That's just our competitive nature, but we make it fun, we make it interesting. He kind of, piloted the project around the different item each month, and, next month it's gonna be ground beef, and after that, it's gonna be, romaine lettuce or whatever it is, but, work with your people because we all have ideas, and it's not just the chef coming up with the idea as to how to save money on the food cost. Maybe it's going to be the director of banquets. I used the example in the book. The director of banquets came back and said, I don't know why we're buying triple A tenderloin. I buy, single or double at home, and it's so much cheaper. And I can't tell the difference. My wife can't tell the difference. So they did a taste test, and the chef goes, "You're right." And you know how much tenderloin we buy a year? Oh my
Mm.
god, it's like hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they just saved 10% on the cost of tenderloin because they went from triple A to double A or maybe even more. But that's the secret, is getting the other people involved. So our focus is food costs, but it's not just me, the chef, you know? It's everybody. Everybody that has a stake in that kind of landscape will wanna play if you make it fun.
Yeah, and the 20/80 rule just goes in so many things in finance, I think, in general, when you look at your numbers, when you govern your labor budget, 20% of your sales come from 20% of your people, blah, blah, blah. You can keep
Yep.
on doing those. And that's a raw, but that makes you start analyzing things in a different way. It gives you a framework for analyzing. And it's one of the things I've seen sometimes, David, as well, between we take, food cost, labor, and revenue. Often what I miss is that people don't connect these lines. They are almost one, oh, no, no, food costs or food waste is a separate line. It's nothing to do with labor. It absolutely have, because we need more labor to produce more food.
Yeah.
So they all connected. So how can you actually optimize by
I
looking
work
at the system
yeah.
thinking of these?
I w I worked in a hotel where we had downtime. We had, seasonal operation basically. But, it's very expensive to keep these places operating, especially the kitchens, when we don't have a big volume of business. But we all know we can't close all our restaurants or else we'll have no business, right? So we have to keep it going during the leaner times. But, you know, in this hotel, the chef would use the example of something like cut fruit. In the summertime, he would just be buying pails and pails and pails of cut fruit for the buffet because they didn't have time to chop it up and didn't have room to chop it up, whatever. But in the winter, he needed to keep the garde-manger going. So what did he do? He stopped buying paled fruit and they were chopping it up and he would do the numbers and crunch it and go, it's actually cheaper if I keep Maria here and she's going to make some salads at lunch for the buffet, but she's also going to chop all of the fruit that I, would buy in high season paled. She's going to do it. And
Mm.
it's a perfect example of how, labor cost, food cost, employee morale, profitability are all completely linked. We got to think it all through. It's all a big puzzle. It's all tied together by the same piece of string.
How is, in your terms, financial leadership or hospitality financial leadership connected with business strategy? Because often finance is the budget does allow you to do things
Yeah.
in the strategy, which is sometimes is a mistake in my view, because it actually, again, coming back to what we just talked about, it all connects. But
Yeah.
how does it work in your view when it's
Well,
best?
there's a big disconnection in our business, and that is that, one or two or three people in most hotels are the ones responsible for making up, propagating, and delivering the numbers. So the rest of the managers are flying with their eyes closed. They don't know what the budget is. They don't know what the forecast is. So what we need to be able to do is reverse that and go, okay, well, we're going to establish a policy where each department manager is responsible for creating their own budgets. They're responsible for writing their own commentary each month. They're responsible for doing the reforecast each month. We're no longer going to allow the director of finance to just dream up the numbers in camera and then, dust them off and review them with the director of sales and get them approved by the GM and send them to corporate. We're not going to do that. We're going to slow the world down. Each manager is going to do their own budget this year. And I worked for a company where that was company policy that everybody had to do their own numbers. And if you were caught preparing your numbers in camera, you got your wrist slapped big time. And that's a perfect example of finance being, pushed out into the organization and it meaning something because every new manager would prepare their budget and their head would be spinning. They'd be like, David, what's this and what's that? And they would be running away and not wanting to do it. But when they would step into it, they would learn so much about their department and so much about the process. They were, like, 9 times out of 10 liking it. Not 100% of the time because some people just don't have that aptitude or they don't want to have anything to do with it, fine. But like you said, we want to find the ones that are keen and we want to work with them and develop them because, and I'm repeating myself, but a great hotel is the sum of its departments, and each department needs to be able to manage their service, manage their colleagues, and manage their budget, manage their payroll and expenses. Pretty
Absolutely
simple.
quite It's quite interesting. My last bit of my ops leader career, I there was another book, and at that time you hadn't read a book, but it was called Open Book Management, and it's called The Great Game of Business by Jack Stack. And I don't know if you've read any of his work, but it's much about
No.
how you engage the front line and your managers in understanding business. And when he talks about business, he talks about profitability, because if we do that, we can actually create that kind of culture where everybody wants to be part. So actually his mission was for everybody to be able to buy out their own home in Missouri, where he was from, Springfield, Missouri. And it's an incredible book. And as well, how you actually can get people engaged in numbers, and they suddenly find out, when I understand this, I can actually change things in my work. I can even get more resource to my department. But actually it
Y
means that I need, as soon as I get this, I actually have prosperity as well. But again,
Yeah,
he
you
made it
just
very hard
explained
for them to learn the business in principle.
yeah, you just explained the whole purpose for my book. That's it. It's all about creating prosperity. And my publisher actually owns those words, the rights to publish the words "The Prosperous." So he's published the Prosperous Coach, he's published the Prosperous Hip Hop Artist, and
Mm.
now he's published the Prosperous Hotelier. But you're absolutely right. That is what is possible. And, hospitality is a tough business, and a lot of people work their whole lives and, don't have that kind of prosperity. But I believe if you embrace your numbers along the lines of the book you were talking about with the other author, it's the same thing. That's what's possible with financial leadership and with knowing your numbers is much greater prosperity in life. And again, it's not about making a bigger salary necessarily, it's about having more time, about having more time to enjoy your life. And that's prosperity.
Um, what book would you, besides your own book, David, what book would you give out to people 9 out of 10 times away as a present,
The
a
4
gift?
agreements.
The Four Agreements. Yeah. Who's the
Yeah.
author?
Oh, you got me there. It's Raoul's somebody, but,
We'll
we can
find it
put
and
it.
put it in the show notes for
Yeah,
you. Yeah.
it's an amazing book, and I do some leadership work with groups, small groups, like I had a group of general managers this summer, 3 of us,
Yeah.
we did some workshops, not around numbers at all, but around leadership, and the 4 agreements is just it's a game changer because it really shows you what life is all about and the mistakes we keep making. So, these 4 agreements are life changing and they're really simple and they're really forgiving too, because the 4th agreement is, every day we get to start over. So even if you screwed up yesterday, it's okay. Just dust
Really?
yourself off and start over again. Anyways, that's the book that I would give it. It's a great read. It's easy. You could read it in an afternoon and it's going to change your life, especially take those 4 agreements, put them on your refrigerator so you see them every day. And because that's the thing is you forget.
Okay, I actually don't think I've read that book. I definitely don't have it in my collection behind me over there. So
Okay.
I'm definitely
Well,
on something there. I can. It sounds like because it sounds like a book I need to read, like the Alchemist and all the classic books you need
yeah.
to read in life.
I'm gonna send you
And
the Cole's Notes version so you can read it in 20 minutes.
oh well, that's even better, David. So, what is your top advice for leaders right out there right now? What should they do when it comes to finances?
Well, it's kind of a big statement to make, but what I would say is make sure you're working for a company and an organization that embraces your development on all levels. Leadership is the key to having a successful career, being a good leader with your guests and your colleagues and your numbers. But if you're working for an organization that doesn't share the P&L or doesn't want to invest in you, take a look around. There's lots of people looking for new employees these days. Find the company that will develop you because, again, I look at myself, like I work for a great company that develops their leaders, and I'm one of them. And I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for them investing in me. And I figured out, maybe earlier on in my career that they were willing to do that. And I stuck with them because of that. And that's really what hospitality is about. And so much of our world today is, private equity and profits for this quarter. So we forget about investing in our colleagues and our leaders and developing people. And people aren't going to come for a summer and spend a lifetime if nobody's going to develop them. So if you're working for a company that's not looking after you and they don't have your back, find one that does.
And it's so
That's my advice.
interesting what you said. I never thought about that way. If they don't want to show you the P&L, you probably have. And if I reflect when it's gone wrong, it's definitely when you didn't have enough insight, or you get a partial
Yeah.
P&L to manage from.
I talk to people all the time. I talked to a general manager at a conference a few weeks ago. He says, I got 16 hotels, David. I don't even let the GM see the numbers. I said, well, how do you think it would work? Or do you think it would work better if they knew what was in the P&L and that they had targets based on last year's actuals and this year's budgets? And he just kind of looked at me like, I had 3 heads, but I could see the wheels turning. He could see for a second there that, maybe he needs to let go of whatever it is that he's holding on to,
Yeah.
that tells him that he shouldn't share the numbers. It's I write a chapter about that in the book, and it's one of the biggest mistakes hotel companies make is not sharing the numbers with their managers. You don't have to share the whole thing if there's certain parts of it, but give them the departmental results. Give them results up to GOP. Come on, get on with it, guys.
That's a great note to finish this conversation on. Thank you so much, David, to come on the show again, share your wisdom, your insights, all your learnings from the book. Where can people connect with you?
Well, thank you, Michael. I mean, thank you for all you do for our industry, and your podcast is awesome, and you are a maverick indeed, and I love that. But to connect with me, my website, hotelfinancialcoach.com. Send me an email, david at hotelfinancialcoach.com. And, I reply to all my emails myself. I don't have that many yet, so hopefully it'll continue. But if you have questions, if people want, I give away some free stuff. My flow through cheat sheet, productivity trackers, and all kinds of stuff. And go to my website. There's over 300 weeks of blogs and videos there you can watch for free and read for free. You can read for the rest of your life there. And go to my YouTube station. It's free. And I actually have an organized course that people can purchase online. It's in conjunction with the Alberta Hotel Association. It's a great course. It's very inexpensive. It's organized so that it'll take you through the learning in a logical format. And, go to Amazon and type in The Prosperous Hotelier and get a copy of my book. I think it's still 30 bucks. I know my publisher sure it keeps increasing the price, but Amazon keeps increasing the discount. So they're in charge of the world, Amazon these days. But, go get a copy of my book and read it and, become more prosperous.
Great, great, David. Thank you so much. And thank you for the kind words, power and energy for the journey ahead.
Thank you, Michael. Appreciate it.